Welcome to the Roy Morgan Weekly Update. This week we have the latest results on Australia's key weekly indicators, as well as new data on the level of mortgage stress in Australia as interest rates continue to rise. Roy Morgan has also produced an in-depth webinar on the Victorian election, due to be held this weekend, and we're in field with our final pre-election poll of Victorians this week. First then, a look at the key weekly indicators. Headline federal voting intentions are unchanged for the third straight week, with the Albanese government on 53.5%, ahead of the coalition on 46.5% on a two-party preferred basis. For the second straight week, both key measures of confidence increased. Government confidence was up 1.5 points to 103, while the key measure of consumer confidence, ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence, was up 0.8 points to 81.6. This is still below the magic 100, but it's the first time consumer confidence has increased in consecutive weeks since late September. Every week, Roy Morgan also asks Australians what they expect annual inflation will be across the next 2 years. And unsurprisingly, inflation expectations have been soaring this year. 2 weeks ago, inflation expectations hit a record high of 6.8%, but the measure has now declined for 2 straight weeks and was down 0.2% last week to 6.3%. This week's small increased consumer confidence keeps the measure within the band of 9 to 10 points that it's been in since early June, that is over 5 months ago. But consumer confidence is now more than 25 points lower than it was a year ago in mid-November 2021, just after the final lockdowns ended in Sydney and Melbourne. And a look at consumer confidence by housing status shows Australians paying off their home continue to clearly have the lowest consumer confidence at only 75.9, down 1 point from a week ago, and down 25.5 points from late April. One of the key factors the Reserve Bank is looking at as it assesses the impact of its interest rate increases is how these increases are hitting Australians with a mortgage. The latest figures from Roy Morgan data shows that 22.6% of mortgage holders were considered at risk of mortgage stress in October. That's the most recent month available. This represents an increase over the last few months from record low levels of mortgage stress earlier this year. But this is in fact just below the long-term average of about 22.8% of mortgage holders at risk over the last 15 years. And it's well below the highs of the global financial crisis in 2008-2009, when 35.6% of mortgage holders, well over 1 in 3, were at risk. In addition, more than 1 in 7 mortgage holders are now considered extremely at risk. Looking forward, it's widely expected the Reserve Bank will raise interest rates for an 8th month in a row in early December. So Roy Morgan's modelled 3 potential interest rate increases of either 0.25%, 0.4% or 0.5% at the December meeting, and where this will drive mortgage stress by January. Under any of these 3 scenarios, the number of mortgage holders considered at risk will increase to just over 25%, between 25.1 and 25.4%. It's got to be understood that this is a really conservative model, essentially assuming all other factors remain the same. And of course, we're already seeing an increase in unemployment, which increased over 1% to 9.2% of the workforce in October, equivalent to 1.36 million workers. And the greatest impact on an individual or household's ability to pay their mortgage is not interest rates. It's if they lose their job or at least part of their income. So now turning to Victoria with the state election this weekend. A special Roy Morgan SMS poll in early November showed support for the ALP government dropping 3.5 percentage points since October to 57%, but still well ahead of the Liberal National Coalition on 43% on a two-party preferred basis. This headline two-party preferred result is virtually unchanged from the 2018 Victorian state election. But the devil's in the detail, and the real story from the most recent Morgan poll is the drop in primary support for both major parties since the last Victorian state election. Support for the Labor Party is down almost 3 points, while support for the Liberal National Coalition is down over 6 points. And the beneficiaries have been the Greens, minor parties, and the Teal independents. They've all increased support. Overall, support for minor parties and independents is now at 31%, up over 9 percentage points from 2018. The special Roy Morgan webinar into the Victorian election also delves deeply into how the electorate views both major party leaders on matters of trust and distrust, and we believe this election will actually be won on trust and particularly distrust. Both leaders, as we see in the chart, have more distrust than trust. 18% of voters distrust Premier Daniel Andrews, and even more, 19% distrust opposition leader Matthew Guy. The difference is that Premier Daniel Andrews also has a significant level of trust in the electorate. 13% of Victorian electors trust Daniel Andrews, while only 4% trust opposition leader Matthew Guy. And that low level of trust in Matthew Guy means his net distrust score of -15 is 3 times worse than Premier Daniel Andrews on -5. So the wildcard in this Victorian election is the potential for a high other vote because both leaders are so distrusted. The risk for Daniel Andrews on Saturday is that several 100,000 distrusters could come out of the shadows and simply vote for anyone who isn't part of the Daniel Andrews or Matthew Guy machine. At the same time, several 100,000 very well-informed voters will likely emerge to vote for Teal candidates. This wildcard is real and may well be dealt on Saturday. I encourage anyone interested in gaining a deeper understanding of what's driving the Victorian electorate and their high levels of distrust for both of the major parties to click on the link and take a look at the special webinar into the Victorian election, and to watch out for the results of Roy Morgan's final pre-election poll in Victoria in the next few days. Looking into next week, we'll be able to see how the Victorian electorate delivers its verdict on the two leaders and who Victorians elect to Parliament. We look forward to bringing you all the latest results for consumer confidence, inflation expectation, and national voting intention. I encourage everyone watching to subscribe now for free to our Roy Morgan YouTube channels for all the latest political, economic, and market research data and insights. Take care. We'll see you next week.